investigating the effectiveness of corpus-based language pedagogy in the online academic writing instruction for social sciences undergraduates. But I would like to say the little research that I did in the classroom is not confined to the online setting, because at some time in the year 2021, we have the hybrid mode, which is half physical, half online mode. So I will be talking about how I adjusted my strategies using the corpus or the corpora tools for teaching English writing. Okay, so I will briefly talk about CBLP as a kind of a TPAC, which is teaching pedagogic and content knowledge. And I will share with you my two stories of how I planned, act, and observe the adoption of CBLP in the online and hybrid teaching modes. And then I will give an overall evaluation, and I will also share with you how I am going to move on to talk, to examine how CBLP is adopted in higher education for academic literacy. So according to the recent article by Dr. Ching Ma, corpus-based language pedagogy can be seen as a kind of TPAC to the extent to which teachers use corpus technology to implement teaching for teaching language subjects. So Dr. Ching Ma also emphasized that corpus tools are no more than tools, because we have to recontextualize the knowledge about what we understand as corpus linguistics and put into the classroom setting, because we don't want to turn students into linguists in that case, especially when my students are from the social sciences background. So the first thing that I am thinking about would be providing them with ample examples or relevant examples that are discipline specific for them to understand how language works in their discipline. So the content knowledge in my case would be teaching grammar to make meaning for writing, because in their course, which is advanced academic English, it's not just about structuring essays or maintaining grammatical accuracy, but also focusing on how we use grammar to make meaning in order to argue, in order to explain, or how we can write concisely. And a part of technical knowledge is how to use corpora in this case, because in the classroom I would also talk about how they can operate corpus tools in order to look for answers that they want for writing. But in the online case, using technology is more than just adopting tools for language learning. And they also have to handle their telecommunication tools like Zoom, like now, how they share screens, how they share answers, and how they are moving or switching among screens. So the technological knowledge that the language teacher would have to teach will also have to how to operate different technologies in order to facilitate learning. So TCK in this sense would be representing knowledge or practicing knowledge about language through corpora. So very quickly, I share my stories, how I adjusted CBLP strategies and resources according to different delivery modes. So basically, it looks like an action research depending on how you frame my experience. So this study is situated in an ever-changing context because we have the pandemic ongoing. And the first story or the first introduction of the CBLP would be during the third wave of COVID, which is July 2020. And there was a time I completed Dr. Ching Ma's course on how to incorporate CBLP into the classroom. And I planned a lesson. And Dr. Ching Ma asked whether I would like to test my lesson. So I did that during the online, emergency teaching. And the second story happened a year later, when things seemed to get better, which we all know it's the beginning of the fifth wave. So I introduced CBLP in a full-fledged setting, in a relatively full-fledged setting in a hybrid mode. So my contents or the materials for the CBLP are all incorporated or all embedded in a kind of online synchronous academic writing classroom using a content management system called Moodle. And with Moodle, students can access visual aids like PowerPoint slides and activity worksheets and web links to Corpus tools. So I kept reminding them whenever you have questions about language, after my instruction, you can always go back to the links. And I use interactive tools in order to help students engage themselves in the Corpus-related activities. For example, quizzes or online polls, real-time polls, or even asking them to write real-time using Google Docs. And the Corpus tools, as you see, I have used Coca, LexTutor, CJA 2014 from PolyU, and Meecups, of course. And the first story happened in July 2020 in online mode. So I dealt with 22 social sciences graduates in a 2-hour online lesson. So 3 hours basically, but the first hour was about contextualizing what argument essays mean or what arguments essays do. And then the second part of the lesson would be a series of activities related to using corpus. So the focus of that particular lesson was to identify language patterns for expressing stance or expressing commentary on the topic, on their argumentation essay topic. So actually, before the lesson, I did tell them to sign up for Coca tool because Coca is not free actually. But if you register as a student or using an institutional account, you may have a freemium version with occasional appearances of advertisements. And before that, I also introduced the corpus using a YouTube video showing them how to use the tool. And then I gave them activity sheets, and because it was online, so I have to turn all the paper-based activities to the Socrative tool. So that means a quiz online tool. The target patterns was these two. So it is interesting, or we find it necessary, or basically with the subject noun, with find it an adjective, and with a dummy subject it, with a linking verb, and then an adjective. And the adjectives that we have mind in the corpus activities would be useful for them to give comments on their subject matters. Okay, aside from having them operate the corpus tools themselves, I also adopted a softer approach, the soft DDL approach, by printing the concordance lines and project them on the screen so that they can at best find the patterns in these small samples of concordances, and also ask them to operate the tool such as Coca and LexTutor so that they know how to get their hands-on experience and how to find the target language features they needed. So after the lesson, we administered a questionnaire survey, but unfortunately the participation rate is not that high. So out of 22 students, only 7 responded. And those 7 students were the ones who were the most committed to all the online activities during the class. In the survey, they said corpus tools or using CBLP has enhanced their learning skills, and out of the scale of 5, they rated 4.25. But interest and motivation not too much, although they said something positive about the usefulness of the tools, especially that these tools help them learn about collocations and grammar. They found COCA is a little bit too difficult to use, and perhaps because of the internet speed or the occasional occurrences of advertisements on COCA, they found the tool too slow, and they aren't sure what the concordance lines means, meaning that perhaps they need the teacher to explain more clearly, perhaps even in Chinese, to explain to them what concordances are and how to operate the corpus tools. And they also reflected that it would be better if they could know about how they can apply the corpus tools in actual writing tasks. So the afterthoughts would be, perhaps in the online setting, it is better to avoid burdening us, including us and teachers and students, with technologies imbued with concepts, because corpus tools can sometimes be difficult to use because of the technicality of it. And some technologies may work better in physical classrooms. I'm talking about maybe pen and pencil, and perhaps the physical environment, that the vibe of discussion may facilitate the use of corpora in the language classroom. And perhaps it's better to unpack concepts in simple terms and real-world examples, meaning that how, maybe in my case, how I use corpora to solve language problems. And the second story, do remind me if I am overrunning or I'm about to end. The second story would be in September 2021, which is a whole new semester. And I adopted CBLP in the hybrid mode, meaning that most of the students are back, but some students were still online. And I had more students in this case. And there were 48. So aside from talking about the language features for evaluation and expressing stance, I also help identify language features and patterns that characterize academic language. For example, complex noun groups, shell nouns, modality, and of course, evaluative language. So roughly, I implemented this approach in 6 to 7 weeks. So similar to the trial lesson, I also used various tools, but this time I didn't use COCA, but instead I used simpler tools like Corpus of Journal Articles 2014 and Lex Tutor with more guidance. And in this case, I also used MeCups, a corpus of effective English essays by native and non-native users. And aside from the online interactive real-time writing exercise or discussion exercises, I also, again, printed out the concordance lines in order to read with the students together and explain to them what, for example, what appears before the keyword, like in this case, possibility. So we have either language features boosting possibility or hedging possibility. So they were asked to find out what are the boosters and what the hedges are. And I also incorporated the pre and post intervention. So I didn't mention anything about corpora in week 1, but I asked them to write an argument essay on a particular topic, like this one. And in week 12, after the intervention, I asked them to write the same topic again. And I collected 33 essays in each round. So the first round would be around 7,000 words, and the second round around 14,000 words. And I ran the corpus in using NCON. And in this presentation, I mainly focused on modality expressions because in many cases when students write argument essays, or especially with teachers' prompts like, do you agree with this statement, like should gender-neutral bathrooms be installed in university campuses, very likely they use I agree. The first thing that they say in the essay would be I agree. Or in the thesis statement, they would say I think or I believe. And all these subjective modality expressions. So I incorporated CBLP to tell them, aside from telling them why we shouldn't use I think and what the alternatives are, I showed examples. For example, in expert writing, we never use I think in your field, like sociology and psychology. So I focused on modal verbs. I focused on I and we with mental verbs like believe, think, agree, propose, suggest, etc. And the two target sentence patterns attracting or eliciting evaluative adjectives in the sentence. So these are the preliminary findings. So after normalizing the corpora, evidently they use more modal verbs in their post intervention writing, because I told them more likely they are expert writers use modal verbs, except for can, because can be vague sometimes in meaning, because can refer to ability, possibility, and also obligations. So they are more careful. They seem to be more careful in using modal verbs. Okay, 3 minutes. Thank you very much. And of the expressions of evaluation and stance would seem to show some improvement with the fewer uses of examples such as I think, support, oppose, agree, and we with modal verbs. And we find a few examples of find with evaluative adjectives, like find it difficult, or some intermediate forms like embarrassing or difficult. Okay. After the semester, I gave them some kind of a questionnaire survey again, and it seems to be better in terms of return rate. So we have 46%, and they talked about the teacher's clear instruction and possible future use. But in terms of interest and engagement, not so much. But you can also see the steady drop of activity and submission rate from 560 in week 1 to 97 in week 12. And on the right-hand side, the two graphs represent how they use the corpora tools, the CGA 2014 and Lex Tutor. So mainly they use the tools during the classes, and you can see the very low use after the classes in the middle of the semester or towards the end of the semester. And from Moodle, I could also see particular students use the tools, but not, the cohort in general. And the students' reflections show some, encouraging findings, because they were able to talk about, collocations, paraphrasing, and using them for finding relevant examples, and they are becoming more able to tell apart verbs, nouns, and parts of speech. But they also talked about what I can improve when I use a CBLP. So perhaps we can incorporate searches together in the class, and perhaps explain how to operate the corpora in Chinese sometimes, and doing more exercise rather than MC questions or short quizzes. And the other thoughts would be social sciences students may be aware about the fact that they are not linguists, so they are still yet to find the point of using corpora for language learning, because when they write their in-class tasks, as I observed, many of them will start from using Google Translate, unfortunately. Okay, so I'll skip a few slides because of the time, obviously. And to wrap up, I think aside from mastering the tools, I will also need to think about how to incorporate the tools with the pedagogical approaches. And the possible future would be if it's less effective or less efficient or less motivating to incorporate CBLP in the real life, real time classroom. Perhaps it's also a good idea to adopt an adjunct model to in the form of SPOCs or face-to-face workshops to teach students how to write using corpora tools. And in this case, I also hope to support subject teachers for making clear literacy requirements of the subjects. So in the long run, using CPLP in the classroom would help subject teachers or language teachers identify what students really need in terms of writing effective essays, and to foster teacher professional development. Is essential that we as teachers, colleague peers, teacher knowledge needs to reflect its collaborative, co-constructed nature. So I would welcome comments, I would welcome suggestions on how to go further or how to improve my teaching using corpora in the classroom. So thank you so much for your time, and the floor is yours. Welcome to give comments.